In this video, we're gonna learn how to make this advertising design from scratch. So without wasting any more time, let's dig into business. This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the ultimate all-in-one solution for creating an incredible website. Hello guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Noor and this is NourArt channel. So as usual, I want to start with the idea and the concept behind creating this advertising design. So the main idea is that this man is searching for the best cola drink into the earth, and this is the last one. He found it into a very remote place. And as you have may noticed that I'm always using sunset or sunrise scenes into my composites. Maybe I'm affected with this sunset scene into my city. But overall, the sunset or the sunrise in this case gives you the feeling of hope. So he finally found it after a long journey. That was the main idea. So how did I create it from scratch? So I started by creating a new project with a 4K size and with 16-bit coloring, and then press create. So this tutorial is going to be like a hybrid between me showing the breakdown of the design into the final PSD file, and I've recorded the process of creating this design so that I can place some parts as a B-roll for you to understand what I've done. Okay, this will make the time of the video way shorter, but you can still follow along with me. So I started by bringing this sunrise sky and put it here and started to tweak it like this. I'm doing that to create depth. So let me show you what do I mean. Can you see the difference between these two images of the sky? This one has like depth, you know, the details of the cloud is bigger here and it's getting smaller with distance. But here it's a little bit more flat, a little bit. That's why I resize it like this. Then started to bring these mountains image and cut it from the background. Very simple. You will find all the images that I'm going to use in the link in the description so that you can follow along with me. This is the best way you can learn. Next, I brought these mountains image and started to mask it from the background. Can you see the difference? Here is before and here is after. I've just cut it from this part and then started to color match the elements with each other. So let's start with the sky. I always start with correcting the lightness values. So the lightness values is basically how dark or how bright the elements should. So I started by creating this curves adjustment layer, and as you can see, I've just opened up the shadows a little bit. That's it. I brought the midtones a little bit down so that I bring a touch of contrast. This is about the sky, and then started to put some colors into the sky to bring this mood into the image, you know. I created it using color balance. Let's start with the shadows. I added some reds, some greens, and some blues to the shadows. As you may have noticed here is before and here is after. The shadows are now more bluish. And for the midtones, I started to give it cyanish, magenta, bluish color, which will shift the colors from more reddish into more magenta colors. Very nice. The main challenge in correcting the colors of the mountains was that this image of the mountain, I like how it looks already, but it is very saturated. The colors are very high. So I started by bringing the saturation down of these mountains. Here is before and here is after, and then started to correct the lightness values. So the next element will be this mountain. So for that, I started with correcting the colors using the color balance. So here is before and here is after. You can notice a huge difference because the main image here was kinda gray, a little bit cyanish gray. So I wanted to get the colors from the ambient light. What is ambient light? It's basically the color that is coming from the sky itself, not from the direct sun. As you may notice here that here this orangey yellowish subtle lights are coming directly from the sun, but in the shadows you will notice that the colors are a little bit grayish cyan, and this color is coming from the sky itself. The sky here works as a big source of light which is casting this color. So in this case we have changed the colors of the sky, so we need to change the colors of the ambient light. That's why I give it this intense magenta bluish color. And how did I correct it? It's basically by adding, let's go to the shadows, by adding a bunch of cyans and magenta and a lot of blues. And I went to the midtones. I've done the same thing, but with a subtle shift in the colors. You can use color balance, you can use selective color to correct the colors, and sometimes you can use curves. That's I'll show you this in a moment. So let's go to the next part, which is these mountains. I started by desaturating the image itself because it has a lot of color. So I started simply by desaturating it. So here is before, here is after, and next I started to correct the lightness values, how bright the element is. And the rule with which I'm fixing the brightness values in these sort of environmental composites is the further you go in distance, the less contrasty, saturated the elements should. Okay, so these mountains should be less contrasty than these mountains, and I will fix this in the next parts. So I started by correcting the lightness values of this image. So let me show you the curves. I just opened up the shadows like this. Simple as that. And for the sake of efficiency, I started to correct the colors using curves. So how did I correct it? It's basically I noticed what colors do I want to add in this image. So I started by adding some red into the mid tones. So if I want to add cyan, I will just decrease it like this, and if I want to add reds, I will just increase it like this. This is for the mid tones, and if I want to add red in the highlights, I will increase it from here, and the same way in the shadows from here. I think you got the point. Then I started to add some magenta by decreasing the greens, and then started to add some blues from here. So this is basically what I've done. Here is before and here is after. That is very nice. And you may ask me, Noor, the image now doesn't look good because here it has a lot of magenta, but here it has some cyans in the shadows. And that's why I started to fix this manually. This area will be lit with the lights, so it should be somehow orangey reddish in terms of the colors, but this area should be cyanish, a little bit magenta colors here in the shadows. So the way I fixed it is by using another curves adjustment layer with a mask. So let me show you the curves layer. Here it is. I just decreased the brightness and then started to add cyan and some blues like this. So here is before and here is after. Very nice. So let's go to the next element, which is the cola can. Before we go to the next point, let's hear a quick message from today's sponsor, Squarespace. We all know that having a powerful website is crucial for creative individuals like us. Now, I'm not a web designer, and honestly, I don't want to spend countless hours creating my own website from scratch. With the Squarespace, all the complex stuff is already taken care of, allowing you to focus on what you do best, unleashing your creativity. One of the things I love about Squarespace is that it's amazing in browser editor. It enables me to effortlessly create a website by just dragging and dropping some elements. It's literally easier than any design software. But Squarespace offers much more than that. It provides a wide range of features, including email campaigns, powerful blogging tools, and my personal favorite, website analytics. So you can easily track track your website's performance. Plus, Squarespace offers loads of modern and solid templates to choose from, ensuring your website looks stunning. Make sure to give Squarespace a trial with their free trial, and when you are ready to launch your website, head over squarespace.com/NourArt to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. I'll drop the link in the description. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the tutorial. So here it is. Started to put it like this to match the shape of the mountains, this direction, and then started to duplicate this image of the mountains and put it in front of this soda can. So let me show you. Here is the duplicate, and then started to mask it in these areas using a texture or a mountain brush. So let me show you the mask. Here's the mask, and I have selected it using these mountains brush. Let me show you how. Something like this. So I'm using this texture brush to just give it like a smoother, more natural transition. And of course, I copied this layer of the color balance to match the colors. That's very nice. Now let's correct the brightness and the colors of this soda can. I started with this curves adjustment layer to make the whole image dark, and the main trick I like to use here to check the brightness values is by simply creating a solid color with any desaturated color from here, and then go to the blending modes and turn it into color. Now I have removed the colors from the equation, and I can judge the brightness values in a better way. So in terms of the lightness, this image is now a little bit dark, but it fits more. Let me show you before. Here is before. It's very bright. But here is after. We will then manually paint some lights into these areas to match the composite. Okay, so I kinda put this check layer above everything and check it from time to time. That's very nice. So the next part is correcting the colors. As you can see right now, the colors of the can has a lot of yellow, and it doesn't have this orangey magenta tint that is existed into the whole image. So I added it using another color balance. Here is before and here is after. It's basically the same process, going to the midtones, adding some reds, some magenta, and some blue. And going to the shadows as well, adding some cyans, some greens, and some blue. It depends on your eye, you know. You need to have a good eye to develop a good eye, and it comes with practice. The color correction thing, I don't like to use check layers because this removes the artist part inside you. You need to see, you need to develop your visual skills, you know. Here's before and here's after. So the next element, I brought clouds image. This is the main image, and started to mask it using a cloud brush. So let me show you the mask. Here is the mask, and here is the cloud brush. I just painted some parts like this. Let me show you. Here's the clouds. I just painted it like this to make like a good mid-ground part. And then started to color correct this part and correcting the lightness. I did both of these things into one layer, which is this curves adjustment layer. So how I did so, I basically opened up the shadows, and to judge it in a better way, I just turned on this layer and started to open up the shadows like this until I got this result. So this is now more matching. And then I started to deactivate this layer and going to the RGB modes. So I went to the red channel and added some cyans, because you know it was something like this. It has a lot of red, and that's why I started to bring some cyans back. And you know, you need to understand a very important concept. If you want to remove some color from an image, you will add the opposite color. How is this? So the red is the opposite of cyan. If I have a reddish color image and I want to desaturate this or remove some reds from it, I will just add cyans like this. This will neutralize the image more. And if I go beyond this point, the colors will be shifted to more of a cyanish color. Okay, so it's coming from its name. It's color balance. You are balancing between the colors. And I've done the same thing with the blue, adding a bunch of blues because it was having some yellow, as you can see. Here's before, here is. So I corrected everything in one layer, and that's very, very nice. The next part is these mountains, these rocks. I chose this rock because I wanted to enhance the composition. You know, this shape, it's kind of like it's pointing towards the soda can bottle. That's why I rotated it to give it this shape, because I want everything into the visual to guide your eye to a main focal point, which is this soda can. So can you imagine if I just rotated this image and make it like this? It will instantly send you out of the composite. Okay, and that is what exactly we don't want. So I started to put it like this and started to select and mask it using some clouds, the same clouds brush basically. You can find all my brushes that I'm using into my course, The Ultimate Guide to Photo Manipulation, in addition to all the PSD files of creating amazing visuals like these. The course consists of 11 fully narrated in English composites, in which I'm explaining every tiny step I took to create these visuals. Starting with gathering the references, the images, the idea, implementing every tiny step with each other. You'll find the course link in the description, and let's get back to our composite. And I've corrected it using the same way. I've just opened up the shadows, decreasing the highlights because the main image was very, very bright like this. So I started to darken it from the highlights and started to open up the shadows, and at the same time I gave the midtones some level of contrast with this point. Okay, and then started to correct the colors the same way, and the same way we did here into this image, we will fix the colors of the shadows because it will have some cast colors from the sky. So I started to make like a curves adjustment layer like this to give this some darkness because this will be in shadows, and I created another color balance to shift the colors of the shadows more towards the cyanish bluish color. So let me show you. Here is before and here is after. It's a subtle change. That is very nice. The colors are not matching right now, but it will in the next parts. So the next element is adding this rocky part. It's actually the same image of this rock. So this is the same image with some tweaks, and then started to bring this guy. This is the main image, started to mask it from here and started to blend these edges. Let me show you the mask here. This is some textured brushes just to blend it into these areas. That's very nice. Next is color correction thing. So let me quickly show you. It's the same process again using curves just to correct the lightness and colors at the same time. And I've done the same thing with the man. It's correcting the colors and lightness with the same curves adjustment layer. Here is before and after, before and after. Let me show you. So here is the red channel. I started to add some cyans, and the greens added magenta, and the blues I added some blue to give me this blending into the colors. That is very, very nice. Now let's start putting the sun. So I started to bring this image of the sun. Here is the main image without screen blending mode, and started to change its blending mode to screen. Started to mask some parts. Here is the mask to get only the sun part like this. That's very nice. And then started to paint the highlights element by element. Starting with these mountains, started to paint the highlights like this. And how did I create it? this highlights effect. It's basically creating a solid color adjustment layer with this color, and then started to use blend if sliders to remove this color from the shadows. So when I remove it like this, now the lights are applied only to the highlights parts. And if I want to smoothen this transition, I just press Alt to split this cursor and split it like this. Well, let me show you. Here's before and here's after, and change the blending mode of this layer into linear dodge. I like how it looks like right now. Here's before and here's after. I've done the same thing to this layer like this, before and after. Very nice. So the next element is the soda can. So I started with creating highlights like this using this time selective color. I went to the neutrals and added some lights, and at the same time started to add some tint to the color itself. So if I reduce the brightness, you can see that the colors now are shifted towards magenta, reddish, yellowish colors. So when I make it brighter, these colors are now desaturated a little bit, and that's okay. Here's before and here's after. And then start to create another layer using solid color, and here's the mask from it. This is basically the same lightness layer. And then started to create the absolute highlights, this time using curves. So I opened up the midtones like this, and then started to give it a color like this, giving it reds, giving it magenta and blue. And this is how I painted the highlights. Intentionally, it is sharper than the other highlights because this is a metal material. So I don't want it to look like it's flat, amateurish lights. I want it to look like it's kind of real. That's why I'm putting in consideration the material I'm painting lights on. And the next part is painting some shadows into these areas using a basic solid color with multiply blending mode. And when you look at the image right now, you can feel that this part is very contrasty. It has a lot of contrast, and it shouldn't look like this because of the atmospheric perspective. And by the way, if you want to learn what is atmospheric perspective, how to make it, I have a full video. You'll find it in the link in the description, as well as a full video explaining how to paint highlights and shadow. So what did I do to fix this? I started to create like a hazing layer. So what is hazing layer? It's basically a solid color adjustment layer, as you can see right now, and I'm giving it a specific color and painting it into some parts from the shadows and removing its color from the highlights to just remove some details from the shadows, because I don't want it to look as it is a clear part, and at the same time it is now dark, very dark. So I started to create another curves adjustment layer, opening up the shadows just to give it more brightness, which will make it hazy more, you know. And of course I gave this layer some color using curves, as you may already guessed. So we painted highlights here, then we should have some shadows over these areas, okay? That's why I created it using this curves adjustment layer. Here is it, here's before, here's after. That's very nice. Now the image is kinda getting back to life, but something is wrong here. The soda can is somehow very clear. In this weather, it's not realistic. So I started to give it some powder texture or some snow, you know, some dirt, so that it's matching better. Here's before and here is after. And next I started to give some highlights in these areas, some glow effects, using this solid color adjustment layer with a screen blending mode. Here's before, here's after. And next I started to paint the same highlights into these mountains, but be careful here. You need to understand something. The lightness here will be more subtle, and here as well. That's why I created like a very subtle lights like this. So here is before and here is after. This time I've used curves, whatever you can use, solid color, selective color. You are an artist using all the tools into your Photoshop to make anything you want, okay? So the same way I have painted the highlights here using the solid color. Here is before, here is after, and I removed it from the shadows using also blend if. I guess you got the point. Next, I started to paint the highlights into the man like this using the basic solid color brush. I started to paint these highlights like this. It's very subtle, and then started to add some elements to spice the image, something like these clouds here into this part. Now our composite is coming into the life. Next, I started to paint like global coloring effect coming from the sun using this solid color. Can you see it? It's now blending the image in a very good way. Oh, let me see. So how did I create? It's basically a solid color, and then started to bring the soft rounded brush and reduce the flow of the brush, making the brush bigger, and then started to give it some touches, make it smaller, some other touches, make it smaller, and so on. So that's how I created this glow effect here. And then started to give some lens flares, some brightness to the sun. So I brought this God rays overlay. So let me show you the main layer. This is the main layer without the screen blending mode. And here is with the screen blending mode, and here is with some masking. Here is before and here is after. And then started to add like global glow effect using an empty layer with the screen blending mode. I'm just giving it some glow effect like this. So how do I create this? Is basically creating a new layer, turning its mode into screen blending mode, getting the brush, and then started to pick some colors from the ambient light. So just paint some lights like this, pick this color, paint some lights like this. And finally started to give it some lens flare effect. At this time, the image looks a little bit good, but it's not together. Everything is not matched together. So I started to create a new layer, press Alt Ctrl Shift E to bring everything into one layer. And then right click, convert it into a smart object, and then go to filter and camera raw filter. And here the magic happens. Let me show you what I've already done. Here is the final results. As you can see, here is before and here is after. It's now more cohesive, everything is blended. So let me show you some things that I've done using camera raw filter. Started to increase the contrast, decrease the highlights because the highlights were very bright, and then decrease the whites and increased the blacks. So I'm now giving the image more contrast. Okay, so here's before and after. This is the contrast. And here started to shift the colors a little bit and giving it some texture, some clarity, some dehazing. So here is before and here is after, and this made a huge change, specifically this vignetting effect, this darkening of the edges. Here is before and here is after. Some grains would help to match the whole image, and some tweaks into the colors. Everything here basically depend on your own taste, how you see the visual and how you want to improve it. So after some tweaks, here is the final results. Here is before and here is after. Alright guys, that was it. As mentioned, if you want to learn how to create amazing photo manipulations and to improve your photo composites, you will find my course, The Ultimate Guide to Photo Manipulation, in the link in the description. And let me know, guys, in the comments. I really want your opinion. What do you think about this episode? Do you like it more, this kind of breakdown episodes, or you prefer the full tutorials? Here in these videos, I'm trying to show you the thinking process, the philosophy behind making the design, the choosing the colors, and everything beyond Photoshop. But in the full tutorials, I'm basically focusing on teaching you how to get the image from zero to the final image step by step. So what do you think? Which one do you prefer most? Thank you, guys. See you in the next videos. Peace.